Lucas Mitchell had always been a man of simple pleasures. He was a mechanic by trade, and his life in the small town of Oakwood was as straightforward as his work. Every morning, he woke up before the sun, made a quick breakfast of eggs and toast, and drove the short distance to his garage. The hours were long, and the work was often grueling, but Lucas didn't mind. He had grown used to it, and he liked it that way. The hum of the engine, the smell of grease and oil, and the satisfying clink of tools against metal, it was all he knew. His garage was small but well kept, tucked away at the end of a quiet street. Over the years, it had become a staple in the community. People trusted Lucas to fix their cars, not just because he was good at it, but because he was honest, reliable, and always willing to lend an ear if anyone needed to talk. His life had been built on this simple rhythm: work, eat, sleep, and repeat. Though he didn't have much, Lucas was content. He had a small, modest home on the outskirts of Oakwood where he lived alone. His days were quiet, filled with the work he loved, and his nights were peaceful, spent watching the stars from his porch or reading a good book before bed. But as much as Lucas had come to appreciate the calmness of his routine, there was something deep inside him that felt restless, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more out there for him, some other path that was waiting to be discovered. Still, that feeling was something he pushed aside, too busy with his day-to-day life to really think about it. One evening, as Lucas drove home after a particularly exhausting day at the garage, the rain began to pour down in torrents. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour as the streets turned slick and wet. Lucas didn't mind. He had driven in worse conditions and had learned to navigate the stormy roads with ease. His only thought was to get home, where he could enjoy a hot shower and a warm meal before bed. But as he neared the outskirts of town, something caught his eye. A car, stranded on the side of the road, its hazard lights flashing erratically in the rain. Lucas slowed down, his headlights illuminating the car and the figure standing next to it. A woman. She was drenched, her clothes clinging to her body, her hair matted against her face as she shivered in the cold. Without a second thought, Lucas pulled over. The rain hit the ground in rhythmic sheets, but he didn't care. The woman looked desperate, her hands wrapped tightly around her arms as she tried to shield herself from the storm. He rolled down the window and called out, "Need some help?" She looked up at him, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion. "My car won't start," she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. "I don't know what happened. It just died." Lucas nodded, already stepping out of the car. "Don't worry, I'll take a look." He walked around to the front of her car, his fingers expertly tracing the engine, looking for signs of what might have gone wrong. It didn't take long for him to figure it out. "Dead battery," he said, squatting down to take a better look. The woman watched him, her gaze lingering on him with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "Can you fix it?" Lucas smiled, already reaching for the tools he always kept in his trunk. "I can jump-start it for you, no problem." With quick precision, he attached the cables, his hands moving in a fluid dance that only years of practice could create. A moment later, the engine roared to life, and the woman's face lit up with a relieved smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Lucas shrugged it off, wiping his hands on his pants. "No need to thank me. It's just what I do. You're good to go now." She hesitated for a moment before offering him a small smile. "Let me at least pay you for your time." Lucas shook his head. "Keep it. Just pay it forward one day. That's all I ask." With that, she nodded, climbing back into her car and starting the engine. Before Lucas could say another word, she drove off, leaving him standing in the rain, his hands still slightly tingling from the contact with the battery. He couldn't quite explain it, but something about that brief encounter stuck with him. The way she had looked at him, the gratitude in her eyes, it made him feel like maybe there was more to life than he had realized. 2 days later, Lucas was back in the garage, working on a particularly stubborn engine that just wouldn't cooperate. It had been another long day, and he was tired, but he was used to it. As he twisted a wrench to loosen a bolt, his phone buzzed on the counter. He didn't recognize the number, but when he saw the message, his heart skipped a beat. "Hello, Lucas. I hope you remember me. I wanted to thank you for helping me the other night. I'm Isabella. I'd like to meet you." Lucas stared at the screen for a moment, unsure what to make of it. Isabella, the woman from the storm. He hadn't expected to hear from her again, let alone get a message like this. He hesitated, unsure whether to respond. But curiosity got the best of him, and he quickly typed back. "Hi, Isabella. Of course, I remember you. It was no problem at all. How can I help?" A few moments later, her reply came through. "I'd like to invite you to meet me. Can you come to my estate? I want to repay you for your kindness. I'll send a car to pick you up." Lucas blinked, reading the message again. Estate? She wanted to repay him? He wasn't sure what to make of it. He had helped her, sure, but he hadn't expected anything in return. The thought of meeting her again, though, stirred something inside him. He didn't know what she meant by repaying him, but the idea of stepping out of his routine, of experiencing something beyond the quiet life he knew, seemed almost too good to resist. He debated for a moment, his mind racing, but in the end he found himself typing back. "All right, I'll come. When should I be there?" Her response was swift. "I'll have a car waiting for you. You'll know the way when you see it." As he looked out the window at the rain-soaked street, Lucas had no idea what he was about to walk into. All he knew was that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet understand. Lucas could hardly concentrate the next day, his mind racing with the strange message from Isabella. The idea of visiting her estate, a place he couldn't even picture in his mind, was both exhilarating and intimidating. What kind of life did this woman lead? What did she want with him? A simple mechanic from a small town. The questions swirled in his head as he went about his day, the usual hum of the garage drowned out by the thoughts racing through him. As the hours dragged on, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. His work felt like a distant memory, his hands automatically moving, tightening bolts and checking oil levels, while his mind remained fixed on the impending meeting. Late in the afternoon, as the sun began to set and the garage started to quiet down, the sudden sound of a sleek car pulling up outside jolted Lucas from his thoughts. He stepped outside, his heart pounding as he saw the black luxury sedan parked at the entrance of the garage. The windows were tinted, and the vehicle looked expensive, nothing like the modest cars he was used to working on. A man in a tailored suit stepped out of the driver's side and approached Lucas with a calm confidence. "Mr. Mitchell?" he asked, his voice deep but respectful. "Yeah, that's me," Lucas replied, unsure of what to expect next. The man nodded and extended a hand. "I'm Simon, Ms. Me, Isabella's associate. She's expecting you. If you're ready, I'll take you to her." Lucas hesitated for just a moment. This all felt so surreal. One minute, he was fixing cars and leading a quiet life in Oakwood, and the next, he was standing in front of a luxury car about to be whisked away to an unknown destination. But something inside him told him to trust this. The curiosity, the mystery, it was too compelling to ignore. He shook Simon's hand and nodded, a silent agreement that he was ready. The drive was smooth, the city slowly fading into the distance as the car made its way toward the outskirts. The world around him grew quieter, more peaceful, and the air seemed to thrum with an energy Lucas couldn't quite name. After what felt like an eternity, the car finally slowed as they entered a grand wrought iron gate that opened to reveal an estate like nothing Lucas had ever seen. The mansion loomed ahead, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens, fountains, and long winding paths. It was an imposing structure, vast and elegant, its white stone walls gleaming in the fading light of the evening. Lucas's breath caught in his throat as they approached the front steps, unsure if he was in a dream. Simon led him to the entrance, where a tall, elegantly dressed woman greeted him with a warm smile. It was Isabella. She looked entirely different from the woman he had met in the rain. Now, she was polished and poised, her hair styled and her clothes impeccable. But there was a familiarity in her eyes, a kindness that reminded him of the woman he had helped that stormy night. "Lucas," she said with a soft, welcoming voice, "I'm so glad you could make it." He nodded, still trying to absorb everything around him. This is incredible." "I'm glad you like it," she said with a gentle smile. "Please come inside. We have much to discuss." As Lucas followed Isabella through the grand hall of her estate, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The marble floors, The high ceilings adorned with golden chandeliers, the rich tapestries on the walls, everything screamed wealth and sophistication. He had never been inside a home like this before, and it made him feel like an outsider in a world he didn't belong to. They passed through several rooms, each more elegant than the last, until they arrived at a study at the back of the house. Isabella gestured for him to sit across from her at a large, polished desk. The room was warm, with large windows overlooking the lush gardens, and there was a calmness to the air that made Lucas feel both at ease and on edge at the same time. "I'm sure you're wondering why I invited you here," Isabella began, her voice calm but steady. She took a seat in a leather chair and looked at Lucas, her expression softening. "What I'm about to offer you is not something I do lightly, but I've thought long and hard about it. You showed me kindness when you didn't have to, and I want to repay that." Lucas shifted in his chair, unsure how to respond. He had helped her with a broken car, nothing more. He hadn't expected anything in return. "I told you, I didn't do it for anything," he said quietly. "It was just what anyone would do." Isabella nodded, acknowledging his words. "And that's what made your gesture so meaningful to me. But the truth is, I can't let it go unrecognized. You've been living your life with integrity, humility, and hard work, and I respect that more than you know. I want to help you, transform your life the way you've already transformed mine." She reached into the drawer of her desk and pulled out a thick envelope. She slid it across to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity he hadn't expected. "Inside this envelope is something that will change your future. A check. A significant amount of money. Enough to ease all of your financial burdens and give you the freedom to do whatever you desire." Lucas's eyes widened as he picked up the envelope, his fingers trembling slightly. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet," Isabella replied with a soft smile. "There's more. I also want to offer you a position on my team. Your skills as a mechanic are invaluable, and I believe you could help me in ways you haven't even imagined. I'm building something, Lucas, and I need people like you. People who are grounded, who understand the value of hard work and honesty. Will you join me?" The weight of her words hung in the air, and for the first time in years, Lucas felt a flicker of something, hope, excitement, fear, all colliding inside him. Could he really take this chance? Could he step out of the life he had known for so long and into something completely unknown? Lucas sat in stunned silence, the envelope still clutched in his hands. He couldn't wrap his mind around what Isabella was offering him. The money alone was enough to set him up for the rest of his life. But the job, working alongside her, in her world, was something he never could have dreamed of. As if sensing his hesitation, Isabella leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "I know this is a lot to take in. You're not the kind of person who seeks out opportunities like this, but I believe this is the right time for you. You've been stuck in a routine, a cycle that keeps you where you are, but there's more for you. I see that in you, Lucas." He swallowed hard, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "I've never had anything like this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've worked hard my whole life, but I've never imagined something like this." Isabella's eyes softened. "I understand, but sometimes life gives us a push, a chance to break free from what we've always known. This is your moment. You can choose to stay in Oakwood, continue your life as it is, or you can take this leap. I won't pressure you either way, but I think you're ready for something more." Lucas sat back in the chair, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He thought about his life in Oakwood, the garage, the small house, the endless routine. And then he thought about the opportunity in front of him. The chance to work for someone like Isabella, someone who saw potential in him, who believed in his abilities. It was a rare opportunity, one that many would only dream of. He looked up at her, meeting her gaze, and for the first time in his life, he knew what he had to do. He was ready for the leap. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Lucas. Every moment felt like it was steeped in anticipation, the weight of his decision pressing on his shoulders. He had spent countless hours reflecting on Isabella's offer. The money, of course, was tempting. But more than that, it was the life she promised, a life far removed from the quiet garage he had spent so many years running, a life filled with possibilities, challenges, and a future he couldn't have imagined. Lucas had always been content with his simple existence. He had no complaints about his small home in Oakwood, nor the long hours he spent under the hood of someone's car. It was enough, or at least it used to be. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized something. He had been stuck in a cycle of predictability, and though he had once thought it was the life he wanted, now the thought of staying in Oakwood, never stepping outside of what he knew, seemed suffocating. He didn't want to live a life of what-ifs. He wanted to break free, to take a chance. Lucas knew he had to make a decision, and as much as the idea of leaving his small-town life behind filled him with doubt, there was something inside him that screamed he had to go. He had to take this leap. On the evening he had decided, Lucas stood in front of his modest home, looking out over the quiet streets of Oakwood. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground, and the breeze carried the scent of rain that had just passed through. It felt like the calm before the storm, the quiet before a great change. He picked up his phone and dialed Isabella's number. The call rang through, and his heart raced. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the moment he heard her voice on the other end, he felt a wave of certainty wash over him. "I'm in," Lucas said, his voice firm but calm. "I'll take the offer." There was a brief pause before Isabella responded. "I'm so glad, Lucas. You won't regret this." As the line went dead, Lucas exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The decision had been made. His life, as he knew it, was over. He had taken the first step toward something new, something big, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. The future was now wide open. The next few days passed in a blur. The helicopter that had taken him to Isabella's estate arrived once again, but this time, Lucas wasn't just a guest. He was about to embark on the journey that would change his life forever. He packed the few belongings he had and drove to the airport, his heart pounding with excitement and nerves. The reality of what he was about to do was settling in, and Lucas couldn't help but feel the thrill of the unknown. When he arrived at Isabella's estate, the helicopter was waiting for him on the vast grounds. The sleek aircraft gleamed under the afternoon sun, its rotors spinning with anticipation. As he approached, Simon, Isabella's associate, greeted him with a nod. "Ready for the next chapter, Lucas?" Simon asked, a knowing smile on his face. Lucas nodded, trying to mask his nervousness. "I think so." The flight was smooth, and as the helicopter soared high above the countryside, Lucas looked out at the sprawling landscape below. The contrast between Oakwood and the world he was entering couldn't have been more stark. The city was sprawling, alive with movement, a stark contrast to the quiet town he had always called home. He thought about the garage, about the work he had done for so many years, and it felt distant, almost like a different lifetime. After a short while, the helicopter began its descent, and Lucas saw it. The headquarters of Isabella's business empire. The building was a modern architectural marvel, a towering structure of glass and steel that gleamed in the sunlight. It was nothing like the small shops and homes he was used to. This was the kind of place that housed people with power, people who shaped the world in ways Lucas had never imagined. As the helicopter touched down on a landing pad atop the building, Lucas felt a rush of excitement, mixed with a deep sense of awe. He had arrived, and as he stepped off the aircraft, Simon led him inside, where he was greeted by a team of well-dressed professionals. They all seemed so polished, so different from the people he had known in Oakwood. But despite the differences, they welcomed him with open arms, and Lucas couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging. Isabella met him in the lobby with a bright smile. "Welcome to the team, Lucas," she said, extending a hand. "Thank you," he replied, shaking her hand firmly. There was a new determination in his voice. This was his fresh start. He was no longer the mechanic in the small-town garage. He was someone else now, someone who had taken control of his destiny. The path ahead was unclear, but Lucas knew one thing for sure. He was ready. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Lucas threw himself into his work, learning the ins and outs of Isabella's business. Though his initial job offer had been focused on his skills as a mechanic, Isabella had a much larger vision for him. She saw potential in Lucas that went beyond fixing engines. She believed that his strong work ethic, his ability to think on his feet, and his integrity would make him an asset to her team in ways he couldn't yet fathom. Lucas spent his days learning about the intricacies of the business. He worked closely with engineers and project managers, helping design and implement some of the company's new ventures. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities, and a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was part of something bigger, something that had the power to change industries and people's lives. Despite his new role, Lucas never forgot where he came from. He remained grounded, humble, and always willing to lend a hand when needed. And in turn, his colleagues began to respect him not just for his technical skills, but for his character. He quickly became a trusted member of the team, and Isabella, who had once seen him as just a kind stranger in need of a second chance, now viewed him as an invaluable asset to her vision. One evening, after a long day of meetings and project planning, Isabella pulled Lucas aside. "You've impressed me more than I thought possible," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "I knew you had it in you, but you've exceeded all expectations." Lucas smiled, a hint of pride in his expression. "I'm just getting started." Isabella nodded, her eyes gleaming with a quiet confidence. "I know, and I have big plans for you, Lucas. Big plans." The word sent a thrill through him. Lucas had no idea where this journey would take him. But one thing was certain, he was no longer just a mechanic in a small town. He was someone who was part of something much larger, and the future was full of possibilities. As the months went by, Lucas's life began to take on new meaning. He was no longer just fixing cars or tinkering with engines. He was part of a thriving business, contributing to projects that would have a lasting impact. He had grown alongside Isabella's company, learning from the best and rising to challenges he never thought he'd face. One evening, after another successful project launch, Lucas stood on the balcony of the penthouse office building, looking out over the city skyline. The lights from the buildings twinkled below, and the air was cool against his skin. It felt like a different world from the one he had left behind in Oakwood, a world of endless opportunity and constant motion. Lucas realized then how far he had come. The man who had once lived in a small town, working on cars in a quiet garage, had now become someone with power, influence, and purpose. And none of it would have been possible if he hadn't taken that first step, if he hadn't chosen to help a stranger in the rain. He turned to see Isabella standing beside him, her presence calm and assured. "You've come a long way, Lucas," she said softly. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied, his voice filled with gratitude. "No," she said, shaking her head. "You did it yourself. All I did was give you the opportunity." And with that, Lucas realized she was right. The future was his to shape, and it had all started with one small act of kindness, a single decision that had changed everything. As Lucas stood there on the balcony, the city lights flickering below like a constellation of endless possibilities, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey he had embarked on had taken him far beyond what he had ever imagined, from the quiet garage in Oakwood to the bustling heart of a thriving empire. And yet, it wasn't the wealth, the power, or even the status that made him feel truly alive. It was the realization that he had taken control of his own destiny. The small, seemingly insignificant choices he had made along the way, helping a stranger in need, stepping outside his comfort zone, taking a leap into the unknown, had shaped a future more incredible than anything he could have planned. He looked at Isabella, standing beside him, a quiet smile on her lips. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice steady but filled with an energy he hadn't known he had. Isabella nodded. "Indeed, the future is always unfolding, Lucas. It's up to you how you shape it." And with those words, Lucas knew one thing with absolute certainty. The road ahead, though uncertain, was filled with endless potential. He wasn't just the man he had once been. He was someone new, someone capable of creating his own path, someone who understood that no matter how small the step, it could lead to extraordinary things. As he turned away from the city lights and toward the horizon, Lucas realized that the greatest adventure was not in the destination, but in the journey itself. And the best part? His journey had only just begun. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story and watch the video. Your support means the world, and I hope you enjoyed the journey we took together. If you liked the story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more exciting content. Your feedback is always appreciated, so feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for more. And remember, every story is just the beginning of something bigger. Until next time.